Welcome to the Art Center of Wilmington Island. We have a turtle that's coming right up out of the water that we're going to use as our demonstration painting today. Hope you enjoy painting it as much as I have. We're going to begin with the sky and then water, and then we'll go right to the turtle. We're going to use a big wide brush to put in our water. We're going to use several different blues today. We're going to use a cerulean blue, which is this color. I'll show you that on the palette. We're also going to use an ultramarine blue with this darker blue. We're also going to use an aqua green. We've got that color that we'll add. And see, I'm not worried about mixing them up because we're going to use them all. I didn't wash my brush. I just layered them over there so that we can see them. Of course, we'll need a lot of white in our picture so that we can have enough light to show our sky being a different color than our water. And that'll get us started. So what we want to do is go with our, of course, sky first with a big wide brush. I'm just going to wipe it across like that to see how all those colors look. And that is a pretty good way for me to judge what value I need for my sky. If I have my white and I begin just adding it to the color that I used to show you what colors we were going to use today, you can see how easy it is for me just to make a shape that looks like an X, and I'm just crossing over. It's just like I'm weaving those colors together. So look how great that looks against the sky with all those fun little stripes that are coming in there. You can see that the blue is really looking like it is making clouds in the sky, and that is so fun and interesting to have. So I'm just going across. It's mostly white, has blue in it, but I'm using the whole width of the brush, and in about 2 minutes I have a beautiful painted sky that really is fun to look at. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my water, except my water is going to be different. It's going to be a little bit darker, and it's also going to be greener. So that's why I'm adding a little bit of this aqua green to my palette. So see the green, it really shows up and makes a beautiful color in the water. But I'm also going to use some of the darker blue, so that'll make the green show up. And now having all of those colors in, I'm just going to keep loading my brush. I'm going to use a long stroke that makes the water look very smooth and still. And I'm using the whole width of the brush. And I'm just continually loading my brush to pick up as many of those colors as I want. And I'm going to keep that brush stroke moving. While those colors are wet, you can see if I pull them together really close to each other and paint them side by side, or sometimes even overlapping, you can see the look that I get of the water and how I can blend and create that look of smoothness. As long as you keep that brush stroke going horizontally, moving it back and forth across the canvas, you can create that look. I'm going to start on one side of the canvas, and I'm going to keep going till I get to the other side. Once I get to the area where the horizon line is, I'm just going to use the toe of my brush to come across and make the line. And then I'm going to go back and start using the width of the brush to blend those colors together. So as I go over to my palette, I'm picking up aqua, cerulean blue, and ultramarine blue. If you don't have that many colors, that's okay. You can create it with one color by just mixing a lot of different amounts of white in there with it. And if you've got a dot of green, even if you don't have aqua, yellow green or a blue green would be beautiful in there. Don't worry about it. Any color green, you just have to play with it and mix in little smidgens of it at a time until you get what you're looking for. That's the ultramarine blue, but you can see on my brush I have all of them. So as soon as I pick up one, I brush it across, blend it together, brush it across, blend it together. When I get to the turtle, I'm just using the toe of my brush. See how I'm going right around the edges to make sure that I can still see his shape. If you cover up some of it, that's okay, because we've got a picture that shows you exactly what he looks like, what his shape is. So if you happen to cover over the feet, don't worry about it. We can paint his feet right on top of the water in the next few minutes, so he won't be missing it, but just for a minute or two. It'll be real easy to put that color right back on top of the turtle. Every once in a while when you're painting, if you will go back and dip your brush in the water and then take the water over to the paint and blend it, that will help you slide across the canvas a little bit easier, especially if you're putting in something like this that you want it to feel really still and calm. If you will just slide the brush across, you can see how easy it is to pull those colors together once you have a little bit of moisture on your brush. If you just pick the water up and go on here, it's not thick enough by itself. You want to make sure that you're carrying enough of the paint and the water so it slides. So you wouldn't want to go over and just put the water on by itself. You'd want to mix it in with the paint just a little bit on the palette first. Now you can see sometimes, like right now, I have a little bit more of the green coming in. That makes it really show up against the blue. And then you can see how I'm going to continue going around, all the way around. Sometimes I'm adding more blue, sometimes more aqua, using just the toe of my brush to go around and to make the outline so I can see where he's going to go. But remember, if I happen to cover up the line, it's not going to hurt anything, because we're going to paint him next. He's over the water. So you always want to paint things that are in the back or furthest away first, and then you can get right in and paint the object that's on top last, and he will look like that he's in the right space. I'm going a little bit darker here with the water, with the blue. I've got a separation line here that I have on the canvas for you to accent the depth of the water further away just a little bit. So if you'll do that darker blue, like on both sides where his face is coming up out of the water, and then take the aqua or at least a lighter blue and come right across the top of it, that'll give you the illusion that you need to show depth in your picture. So we'll use a lighter blue up above his head. And then his head can pop right out of the water where you want it to go. Okay. So I'm going to begin by telling you to change brushes and go to the one that's rounded on the end. So it's the big one, but it's the filbert, so it has the round edge on it. And what we're going to do, and I'm going to demonstrate this a few times so you can watch a few times and paint and go back and watch and paint some more. But if you'll notice, it's almost like a grid where it's almost making like a diamond shape. So if you think about it like that, let's just take one, and I've got white on my brush, but I call it like a dirty white. It's not white by itself. It has a little bit of the ochre color in it, and it also has a little bit of the aqua in it too. But anyway, it's a light version of that, so it has a lot of white in it, and then the colors that you have in your water. So the first thing I want to do is just to come through And I'm gonna put and I've got, remember water's on your brush, because that was the first thing, you're gonna dip it in water. So I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna make a diagonal that comes up to just about where the turtle's flipper is. So it's a short line that just comes up. And I'm gonna repeat that again and again and again throughout this bottom section. So it's somewhat of a diagonal, but it's not a true one, of course, just real sketchy. So I just made light lines, basically a lot of water on the brush, a lot of white, and then some discoloration of the colors that are on there. And then I just went through and laid in a pattern that's gonna be somewhat of a grid, but it's just a very irregular line. It's not solid, it's just sort of a broken line that comes through. And now I'm gonna do it the opposite way, just like you were making a checkerboard pattern pretty much. So I'm gonna come across in this way. Instead of going up towards the right-hand side, I'll be going up towards the left-hand side, and I'll just like cross over. And like I said, I'm just using a little bit on the edge of the brush. I'm not making a real line or an edge, because I'm using that round brush, and it's just creating sort of a soft edge that's coming in and making the appearance that we're gonna get with that light coming in. So right now it's pretty set with two sets of lines that sort of weave together. And to break that up a little bit, what we're gonna do is we're gonna come in in between those spaces, we're just gonna hit some of the spaces with the brush, just skim across the top of it. So it's not a set line. It's just, you create sort of a pattern, but it is not very specific. And then once you have your little pattern created, you're gonna take that same round brush, and now you're gonna get some of your darker color from the blue and the aqua, and you can decide how distinct you want it to look. You can play around with it just a little bit. I'm adding some of the yellow green to the picture too now at this point. The yellow green can really show up down here because it can look brighter if you use the yellow green in addition to the aqua. But what I actually want to do, if you'll just sort of, with those colors on your brush, if pretty much you just wipe the brush off after you load it with color, and then you're just going to skim it right across the top inside the area where you can see the diamond shape. You just push a little bit of the paint inside that space, and there you can see the differences in the colors, and it accents the white just a little bit. You can see it stand out a little bit more, and you're just scuffing it right across the top, but inside the areas where you drew yourself a diamond shape. And just continue doing that until you feel like that it looks like the bottom of the ocean. Now I'm dipping my brush in water. I'm wiping off the brush some where I'm just carrying a little water and a little paint, and then I'm just gonna lightly move the wet paint around just a little bit so it's not too definite, not too specific. I'm just pushing it around. You can load your brush with more water and more of the yellow green if you want to. And once again, wipe off a little bit on the palette And see how you can just come across, and it almost, when you do this with the brush, it gives that feeling of the water almost like moving right as that turtle moves. And it's just a little bit of the color that just is almost like glazing right over the top of the lines that you put while ago. You're almost making the lines disappear right up in this area. I'd keep them pretty strong down here, but you can blend them out a little bit with the aqua color here. And then you are ready to paint the turtle. So we're going to wash out the two bigger brushes and get ready for one that is smaller. So if you will wash your brushes good and then put them away, you can stand them up in your paint tub. And we're going to get out the smaller brushes that we're going to use. We're going to get the flat one first. We're going to put both of them in the water just so they can soak up the water a little bit. And then we'll be ready to paint with them. With the smaller brush, we're going to load it with white, and literally we're going to paint the turtle white, because all of the detail that we put in there, we don't want to have to go back and outline white around it. So load your brush with white, and you paint the whole thing in with just sort of scrubbing. When you get to a line and you don't want to lose it, just lightly go around it. You can see how I'm just edging it in. It doesn't have to be a heavy coat of paint, but we do want enough that the canvas is covered so that you won't have to tweak the white anymore. So if you will start with the head area and just go right around, you can leave all the eye area open with the drawing. You don't have to literally cover that up, but we want all the other areas. If you get to a line and you just lightly go over it so that you can still see it, that will be great. That'll be coverage enough. If you cover it up, you can just redraw it with a paintbrush in a minute, so it won't be a problem. But just to make things easier for you, we want to get a good underpainting of white. So we're just spreading it out. Now the three big shapes that you have in the middle, they are going to be painted the dark color, so you really don't have to fill those in. You can just sort of go around them. And a lot of the shell at the top is going to be covered, but we want that little bit of white area to stay white. We'll add some other shades of color to it in a minute. Now, just a nice, good white underpainting. Since you've got this bright brush with a nice edge on it, you can go right and follow your drawing right up to the drawing line and literally make the edge of the turtle. And then all of a sudden you can tell that he's right out in the water. So the first color that we're gonna add to it is gonna be the yellow ochre and white mixed together that we used for this bottom section. I still have the white on my brush. I'm just picking up a little bit of the yellow ochre and I'm going under this shell part right here. And I'm adding a little bit of the yellow ochre and white. I want it to look like it has a shadow underneath the shell, so I'm going to darken the yellow ochre. I'm going to add yellow ochre and put a dot of blue in it so it goes dark enough that you can see right up underneath the shell, just following the line. And I'm putting it right on top of where I just painted. And it's yellow ochre with a little blue in it. And it will be the shadow from the turtle shell right onto his body. So it's yellow ochre and white, and then I added a little blue or turquoise, either one or both will work. And then you just go in and you pretty much draw a line. It's a shape, remember, because it's a cast shadow, but it looks like a line by the time you go around that area. And now we're going to do the same thing to his neck. What we want to do is this time we want to add white with that yellow green color. So it's white and yellow green, and we're going to put that right in the area for his neck. So his neck is turned and moving upward, so we want to put those wrinkles in it. So I put the yellow green in with the white, a little bit of the yellow ochre. Then to just refine it a little bit, I can put a little bit more yellow ochre in towards that middle, that center part. And then we're going to go darker, so it'll really make it look round. And that's where you're going to need your black. So remember a smidge, and it's better just to do it in tiny little increments so that you don't get too much. Right into the brush, didn't wash it or anything. I just added a little black to the yellow ochre that's already on the brush, and I'm going from the neck, top area, down to the bottom area. And I'm making it wrinkly looking, so I'm not blending the lines. I'm making it pretty stripy looking. So I just added black to the yellow ochre, and I turned each little brush stroke circular, just the way the neck is turned. And that makes the biggest part of the crease. And now the only thing I have to do is come back with white, and I can just touch inside each one of the spaces. And now it's really creasy looking because that white really makes it stand out. So now while you have the grayish color on your brush, because you took white, you mixed it up with black, you're going to come in. We're going to go up and put a mouth line in. So you see the point where the nose is, right up underneath where it changes, we have basically just a shadow line that is cast by the nose being overlapped with the mouth. So with a gray color, a lot of white, and a smidgen of black, we're just really making a line that represents the overlap of his mouth. Then we're going to go in the space where his eye is, and it basically looks like an egg shape, like a circle in half, and in the middle of it is the black, and on the other side is the gray. So I've got the gray on the brush, so I'm going to that left-hand side, and literally I'm just going to fill it in with gray. And as you can tell, it's like the eyelid is open, so it has a little line on it that shows where it's creased. So the gray part goes on one side, and then we're literally going to take the black and put it on the other side. So we took the shape that's like an oval, and we're making half of it light gray and half of it black. And then we're going to use the edge of the brush to go around and shape the lid. So the black line goes all the way around the gray. If you don't like using the flat brush, now would be a good time for you to swap over and get out your pointy brush. Some people like the round brushes better. It's easier for them. And you can certainly use that if you want to. The line on the bright brush will definitely do it. But if you're not an experienced painter and you don't have a steady hand, it's a little bit harder with the other brush. So gray on one side, you can see where the black goes on the right, and then just dip your brush in the water, roll it in the black paint, and then you can go and make a line that literally is just almost like the eyelid that would be opening or closing. So I put just a little edge around that whole oval shape. And then I put one as the lid. So I just took and divided the lid in half where the gray is and put another line. All those lines are very simple, just one stroke, one mark. You'll notice that the part under the eye is the first part that we're going to use to make the spots. So what we want to do with that is dip your brush in the water and then go over and get black paint and literally roll your brush in the paint so you can use the tip of it to make your lines or your shapes with. And you're going to have to continually do that because you've got a tiny little brush with a little bit of paint on the edge of it, so you don't have much to use anyway. But the first dot or speck that I want you to make is the one that is on basically the top of his head, and it's the circle kind of shape that goes. So if you've got the oval shape for his eye, if you look right behind that, it literally goes to the back of his head. And it's a circle that just is to the right of the eye. And that'll get us going. We're not going to do every one of these that detailed. We're just going to make little smudges of marks. But we want to set that one up because that one's pretty important for the size and the shape of it. But basically it's a circle and it goes right over to the top of his head. Now if you, as you notice when you were looking at your inspiration piece where the white is his nose and then his mouth, here you've got a line that you drew that separated the face from the two parts, the nose and the mouth. And literally what I'm gonna do, and I'll show you again over and over again, but literally you're just gonna take your brush, you're gonna lay it down and you're gonna brush. You're gonna lay it down and you're gonna brush. You're gonna lay it down and you're gonna brush. And those are gonna actually make your shapes. We're not gonna draw them out and then fill them in. We're gonna make each one of them. So these are literally gonna be different sizes, different shapes, and you'll continually do that until you fill up all of that head area. They're smaller in the front, and as they turn and go to the back or the top of his head, they get bigger. So that's the way we want to do it. We want the ones over here, that's why I wanted you to get that first one marked out so that you can see what size it is. And then the ones that are back here are bigger. And then the ones that are here get a little bit smaller. But there's no, you know, if you want to go through and follow a line doing it, you'll drive yourself crazy because it's not a rigid pattern. And it's so easy just to take and just literally push your brush down and go back and forth, and you have your mark. If you load black on that and literally you're going to paint in that shape, and you can see that I'm using my brush till its fullest capacity. What I'm doing is I'm laying it down flat to fill up the middle, and then I'm turning it to the edge to do the line. And right now I'm just going to do it a solid color, black, and then I'm going to accent it a little bit with gray in the middle to make it look like the turtle shell is rounded. But these are the three big ones that I wanted us to make sure that we get the right shape. And then the rest of them we'll build around it. So we've got three big ones to do. So choke up on your brush and get a nice hold on it so that you won't have any problems with laying down the brush and filling up that space. And you know you've got the round brush that's smaller, so if you need that, you can use it. But I'm laying down the full width of the bright brush. While the black is still wet, I'm going to put a smidgen of white, and I'm going to lay it right in the middle of the turtle's back in each one of those black shapes, and just barely blend it just a little bit. We want it to be a little discolored, not black black. We want it to have a little gray effect in the center. Okay, now let's leave that one for a minute and move. If you will load your brush with black again, back and forth on both sides of your brush, just load it with the black paint. What we want to do is we want to come down and start a pattern for this one. So the easiest way to think about this one, in this corner, we're going to lay the brush down and we're going to make a shape that goes right in the corner. And in between each one of these shapes, we're going to leave the white of the canvas showing. And these are basically going to look like rectangles. So they're longer than they are wide. So I just picked up the brush and moved over. I'm laying down the brush. I'm going up, almost like the diagonal, like how we're going up this way to the end of the canvas, to the corner. And I'm just laying the brush down flat. And as I go from the bottom to the top, each one of those get a little bit shorter and a little bit smaller. So you're using the full width of the brush to lay it down. Remember, if you need water on your brush to make it flow, do that, but tap it dry so that you can keep it from dripping. So I'm turning my brush forward and backwards just to keep enough paint. And then as I move upward, I'm getting smaller and smaller. And by the time I get to the neck, it is really small. So that's sort of a regular pattern. Now, that same regular pattern is in another place, so I want to show you that one. And then we'll talk about more of the irregular ones again. So dip your brush in water, dip it in the black paint. I'll let you catch up a minute, and then we'll make another row of them. Okay, so we're going to start at the very end. Now, the shape that we make for the square coming around this way is going to literally go up to this line that these shapes make. So it is a little big and it looks overpowering at first, but don't worry about it. It will work out. So there is one shape that we're going to make for a square, and then we're going to skip and we're going to make another shape, because what we're doing is we're putting that square in between and leaving the white all the way around it, all the way up. So you're just going to make it fit by using your brush and just pushing the paint so that we have white along the edge and a white line that goes in between those three shapes that we put in. Remember, it's a small brush, so you'll have to dip it in water, load it up with paint several times till you get to the end. They're not true shapes. They're certainly not just square, but they are basically like that. And you're going to run all the way around. And when you get to the corner, it's more like a triangle when you get to the top. So it's like half of that square. So the first time you put those on, I just did them in black, but now I'm going to add that gray sort of to the center. So what I want to do is put a little white on my brush, just a smidgen, and I want to come in and I want to blend just a little bit of white. In each one of them, so they're not black. Just a smidgen. Okay, let's go for another obvious shape, and that's going to be the tail. I'll call it the tail. Looks like a triangle on the back side, but that's this flipper. It's the corner flipper on the back side. And basically, you're going to come from the body over and up and leave the white around the edge, but just make like a triangle shape in the middle. Okay, now, since you've made that triangular shape, what we wanna do is go in and put the next shape that's gonna go in this middle section that doesn't have one. And it looks like a triangle too, but it just has a different line on it. So basically, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna make a shape that looks like a triangle, and I'm gonna let the edge go all the way over to the tail that you just made with the white triangle around it. So if you don't want it to touch, you don't have to, but basically you're making a triangle that sits in between this shape and this triangular shape. It just fits right in the middle of it. Now, to fill in this space at the top, we're gonna do about the same thing. I'm gonna fill that in next. I'm gonna come around and make a line that continues the line in the front and then goes to the top of the turtle. And then stops when you get to this shape that we made at the very beginning, but the black does go all the way to the top of the shell. So what we're trying to do is to keep that white line going around that space. Now, the next one's gonna be easier because you're making a triangle in that meets. So we're gonna do one line copycatting this one, and one line copycatting that one, and a line copycatting that one. So if you don't recognize it, it looks like a rooftop upside down. Or two triangles put together. So this part is like the rooftop, upside down. And then you get to do it again, the same thing. You make a triangle or a rooftop. And you just keep it white in between. You go black all the way to the top. And then you have one more to make. Triangle, like a rooftop. And then it's the end of it. Just squeeze it in. Now, each one of those needs just a smidgen of white in it, just to give it a gray tone. So it won't be black, it'll be spotty looking. All right, there are more spots for us to consider. The next row that we make is going to be almost a repetition of this row, except it's a little bit smaller and the shapes are not as constant. They change. They're not the same size or shape either, for that matter, but it is in a nice little neat row. So keep the little white line flowing right through the middle, and then begin, and this time if you'll use your brush almost like you're gonna make a rectangle going the sideways instead of this direction. Like a while ago, we were making the shapes go up towards the corner. Now they're going the other direction. They're really easier to make that way because what you can do is once you get this line going, you can just move in that direction. Just use the whole width of your brush. And by the time you get over here to the shoulder part, they are getting smaller and smaller, and they become more like triangles than they are squares or rectangles.
Oh, no, I feel comfortable, yeah.
Assuming most people are ready, but it's funny, the lefties always come.
Oh, I didn't even realize, like, I'm just, yeah.
Well, you flip it, so you anyway, well, I'm sure you've adapted to your whole life. But it's cute, sometimes the left-handed people will do line for the outer edges so that they can shift where it's
Now, you have another row, but what I'd like for you to think about is you have two rows that almost interweave together, so they connect and the line is not straight like it. This one goes through the middle here and it's pretty much straight and even, but the next one is not. So basically you're going to have two lines, but you're going to change the direction so that it doesn't look even. It doesn't look like a straight row. So you could almost alternate the way you hold your brush. I'm laying it down and really just pushing it in and making a shape. And as I go up, remember you're going to get smaller by the time you get to that neck area. So that'll be like row 3. And row 4 is just where you're going to fill in the extra space that's left. So just go real close to the one that's on row 3 and fill in for row 4. The last flipper right here is like rows 3 and 4, where it is very inconsistent and it does not contain a rigid pattern. So if you just lay down one brush width in the corner at the bottom and just move up towards the top and just lay your brush down in any angle or any direction. Always get smaller as you go towards the top. So you'll get one row in. And then literally you do not need to even think about a row for the next one. You're just going to lay your brush down. If you put enough paint on it and just move it back and forth just a little bit, it'll lay down just enough paint to cover. You just have to load your paint brush over and over so you'll get the coverage you want. Of the work, but as we begin to look at a few more wrinkles, we will be able to make sure that he looks like he is all together in one unit, like where we made the wrinkles here. We also have a few wrinkles down right here on his shoulder. So using that same brush with black and white. What we want to do in this area is come in and make a few more wrinkles that show right in this area. And basically the line that we're going to make is going to be almost like a C shape that's backwards.
You might need to walk around with that one. 'cause it's
Yeah,
hard
they're
to
so
see
small.
back here.
Okay, one of the things that is important too is making this head look round. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a little bit of shading that we were gonna do. So with the gray on your brush, if you will dip your brush in water and really have about half water and half paint, but a light-ish gray color. And what you wanna do is just go in this area on the back of his head, and the area that is white, you're literally just glazing over the white and changing it over to gray. So we want this back or the top half of his head to be grayish, but we want to leave all this in the front white, and that'll make his head look round. So literally we're just putting a little bit of gray right on top of each one of the line areas that are white. So we're just toning down that white just a little, almost just like putting a glaze or washing it right on top. We also need to put a little bit of gray back here on a few of these, so I'm just taking the gray and laying it down in a few of these spots, especially the ones up underneath in this area. These can stay pretty black to pretty dark, but if we could go in and lighten up a few of those, it would make the flipper look like it was in the space better, so it would be like, instead of flat, it would be moving just a little bit. We're gonna do the same thing here, just a little bit of the gray on this back line of shapes. And then most of you did this before, but if not, you can add, we added some gray, but I'm gonna come in and add a little bit more gray in here. The more contrast you have with the black and the white, the more depth you're gonna get in the roundness of this. So I put a light gray on each one of these along the outside edge, and then that will make it round out toward the middle. And then for his tail, you can go in. We just did that, a black triangle. So if you'll come in and almost like put a gray triangle in the middle of the black triangle, you will literally have it done. Now we have a little sweep of color that we talked about earlier coming right behind his head. If you will take the black on your brush and mix a little blue with it, and just come in, if you'll go in between where his eye is and that first round circle that we made, just go in and come across like you were drawing a line, but it's not all that straight and it's not solid. It's just a couple of little brush strokes of color that make almost like a diagonal mark coming right behind his head. And that'll just give it some depth in the picture too.